Sure. I think in the space we're in, which is the engineering space, the electrical system has obviously copped a hammering. There's a lot of systems, certainly in the Brisbane scenario, where a lot of the basements and systems were in basements that have been affected. In, in terms of those types of systems, you're talking about things like lifts, main switch rooms, car park exhaust systems, all those sorts of things. In the broader infrastructure aspects, you're talking about electrical distribution systems, some of the sewage systems, and the wastewater treatment, stormwater systems. I think in terms of timing, it's a bit of a staged approach. I think there's been a push very quickly to get systems back up and running, and it's remarkable how quickly those systems have got back up and running. There's a little bit of backtracking to do on a lot of those systems in terms of their current compliance. Some of those things have been band-aided together a little bit, and we've certainly seen cases where people have done things that are not to the codes and need to be, retrospectively fixed up. And then there's a longer term situation where some of those things that have been got up and running, there's a lot of checks and a bit of due diligence to be backed up. I think it's fairly understandable people need to get back in action quickly. But we can't forget that some of those things need to be go back and checked. Things like switchboards and things in some cases have been got up very quickly in a safe condition, pending a future check. So that's probably sums it up. There are other things obviously on a longer term design basis which will have to change, and no doubt the flood and to a similar extent the cyclone will force those thoughts to happen and changes to happen. The changes, I think, one thing for sure is that I think there will be changes in code compliance. I think there'll be issues. I'm not suggesting that people's ability to accept risk or otherwise will be codified, but in cases like emergency services, I think that will result in changes. There'll be requirements that we'll need to comply with that'll affect the way we design some things. I don't think that'll be the first influence. I think the first influence will be fairly commercial. I think some of the calls, whenever you design anything, it's always a series of compromising forces that you're working with, and I think the first influence will be a bit of a swing back away from a classic example is in a city centre, ground floor and first floor space is prime. That's meant sometime over the last, particularly in the Brisbane cases, probably sometime over the last 35 years, there's been a push to put things in basements out of the road. We need that prime space. I think that balance will swing back again. I think guys will realise that some of those calls perhaps weren't the best calls to be made, given the basis and the locations of those buildings. And we're certainly seeing some of that already. Some of the jobs that we've gone on at the moment have subtle redesigns happening to pick up those types of issues. Yeah, I think similar to what I was saying before about in some cases the most important thing is a timing thing, and we have to get things up and running quickly. In other cases, some of the the spends we're talking about on some of this replacement is a very big spends, and I think it would be a great shame if the opportunity was lost not to consider whether the model that was there previously was the right model and whether there should be modifications to it before it's rebuilt. In some cases, for instance, electricity distribution systems, you don't have that opportunity in terms of repair, you need to get up quickly. In other cases, there's certainly infrastructure that those opportunities will be there, and that's in terms of replacing stuff that has to be replaced at the moment. Some of the replacement programs are obviously blowing out to significant years. I think it's very important that we take the time at the front end to make sure what we're replacing the infrastructure with makes sense in that what I guess some people would call a new reality. Yeah, it's funny. I treat the cyclones quite different to the floods. I grew up in northern Queensland, at least central northern Queensland, and despite the sort of damage that this one has caused, cyclones are a regular event up there. And obviously, if a cyclone coincides with a major population area, then that is an issue. But it's always been an issue. In terms of the flood's a different deal. I mean, obviously the expectation is that that's a 1 in 50, 1 in 100 year event. That may turn out not to be the case. In terms of what is flushed out in terms of the infrastructure, I think the surprise has really been the resilience of the system. I think things like the electricity system were up in most cases remarkably quickly, and a lot of the news you hear about power not being available has more to do with the local infrastructure or the local position in that building. Certainly in Brisbane, there's a lot of buildings that didn't have the power put back on simply because it wasn't safe to put it back on. The vast majority of areas had power available quite quickly. As for instance, if you look at the stormwater and sewage systems, yeah, they copped a beating for a week or so, but they're back in pretty good shape now. And while there was a little bit of concern for a little while about some of the qualities, that issue's been ironed out.